The salvage beacon had been broadcasting for 3 standard days when Marcus Chen's beat-up freighter, Rusty Venture Asterisk, finally picked up the signal. Most scavengers avoided the outer rim of the Helix Nebula. Too many pirates, too many things that went bump in the void. But Marcus wasn't most scavengers. He was broke, desperate, and had a mouth to feed that wasn't entirely human. "What do you think, Pepper?" Marcus asked, scratching behind the scaled ears of the creature perched on his shoulder. The dwarf dragon was no bigger than a house cat, with midnight black scales that shimmered purple in the right light. Her golden eyes fixed on the scanner display showing the distress signal. Pepper chirped once, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. She'd been with Marcus for 5 years now, ever since he'd found her egg in a derelict research station. The xenobiologists had been trying to breed smaller versions of the massive Terran dragons that had become humanity's secret weapon in the galaxy. Most people thought dragons were myths until humans started riding them into battle against alien fleets. The signal was coming from a Kethvar warship, one of the big ones, probably a destroyer class. The Kethvar were the galaxy's premier warriors, standing nearly 8 feet tall with natural armor plating and strength that could crush steel. They'd been humanity's enemies for the better part of a decade, ever since first contact had gone sideways in the worst possible way. Marcus adjusted his course toward the signal. His ship wasn't much to look at, cobbled together from parts of a dozen different vessels, held together by prayer and duct tape. But she was fast and quiet, perfect for a salvage runner who sometimes had to get in and out of places where he wasn't exactly welcome. As they approached the Kethvar ship, Marcus could see why it was broadcasting distress. The asterisk bone render asterisk. He could read the alien script thanks to his military translator implants, was listing badly to starboard with massive hull breaches along its port side. Scorch marks suggested it had been in a running fight with someone and lost badly. "Looks like somebody really worked them over," Marcus muttered, running a full-spectrum scan. Life signs were minimal, maybe a dozen Kethvar still alive out of what should have been a crew of 200. The ship's power was failing, life support barely functioning. Any smart salvager would have waited for the ship to go dark, then moved in to strip whatever wasn't nailed down. Kethvar technology was worth a fortune on the black market, especially their weapons and armor. But Marcus had served in the war before becoming a scavenger. He'd seen enough death to last several lifetimes. I know, he said to Pepper, who was giving him a disapproving look. "We should just wait it out, but look at those life signs, they're fatting fast." Pepper made a sound somewhere between a purr and a growl. She wasn't entirely civilized, despite her small size. Dragons, even dwarf ones, were predators by nature. Marcus docked his ship to an emergency airlock on the Kethvar vessel's lower deck. He sealed his helmet, checked his sidearm, and made sure Pepper was secure in her harness. The little dragon could fly in zero gravity better than most people could walk, but ship combat was dangerous even for creatures with natural armor. The airlock cycled, and Marcus stepped into hell. Emergency lighting cast everything in bloody red shadows. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burned electronics. Gravity was failing in sections, creating pockets where debris floated lazily through the corridors. Marcus activated his magnetic boots and began working his way toward the bridge, following his scanner's readings. He found the first survivor in what looked like a weapons locker. A Kethvar warrior, probably young by their standards, was trapped under a collapsed beam. The alien's natural armor was cracked and bleeding, but their eyes were alert and filled with the kind of hate that had fueled 10 years of war. The warrior spoke in rapid Kethvar. Words that Marcus's translator helpfully informed him were mostly creative threats involving his ancestry and internal organs. "Easy there, big guy," Marcus said, kneeling to examine the beam. "I'm here to help." The Kethvar's secondary arms, smaller than their primary limbs but still strong enough to crush bone, flexed weakly. They were trying to reach for a weapon that had been knocked several feet away. "Yeah, that's not happening," Marcus said. He looked at the beam trapping the warrior. Too heavy to lift alone, but his cutting torch could probably slice through the support structure without bringing down half the ceiling. Pepper chirped a warning. Her hearing was better than his, and she'd picked up something moving in the corridor outside. Marcus drew his plasma pistol, a human weapon that most aliens found disturbingly effective, and waited. 3 more Kethvar warriors stumbled into the room. These ones were in better shape, though their armor bore the scars of whatever fight had crippled their ship. They took one look at Marcus and went for their weapons. "Hold it," Marcus shouted, keeping his pistol trained on the largest warrior while backing toward a defensive position. "I'm here to help. Your ship is dying, and so are you if you don't accept assistance." The lead warrior, distinguished by the intricate scarring on their armor that marked them as an officer, spoke in heavily accented standard. "Human scum comes to steal from the dead. You will join them." "Look around," Marcus gestured at the sparking electronics and failing lights. "Your life support is failing. Your reactor is going critical. You've got maybe an hour before this ship becomes a tomb. I've got a functional vessel with medical supplies and life support for everyone still alive on this wreck." The officer's translator worked overtime as Marcus spoke. Kethvar were proud, honor-bound warriors who would rather die than accept help from an enemy, but they were also practical enough to know when they were beaten. "Why," the officer asked finally, "why would human help Kethvar?" Marcus thought about the easy answers: salvage rights, prisoner exchange, basic decency. Instead, he told the truth. "Because I'm tired of war. Because your people, even if we've been trying to kill each other. Because maybe somebody has to be the first to stop shooting." Pepper chose that moment to poke her head out of Marcus's collar, her golden eyes reflecting the emergency lighting. The Kethvar warriors recoiled as if they'd seen a ghost. "Dragon," the trapped warrior whispered, the word coming out as a hiss in their native tongue. The officer's weapon wavered. Every warrior in the galaxy knew about Earth's dragons, about the impossible partnership between humans and creatures that shouldn't exist. They were living symbols of humanity's stubborn refusal to accept the impossible. "Little one," Marcus said to Pepper, "but she's got the same fire as her big cousins." The standoff stretched for long seconds. Then alarms began blaring throughout the ship, and the lights flickered ominously. Whatever was wrong with the reactor was getting worse fast. "Decide now," Marcus said. "Pride or survival, your call." The Kethvar officer lowered his weapon first. The decision seemed to physically pain him, but survival instincts overrode warrior pride. He barked orders in his native tongue, and the other warriors reluctantly holstered their sidearms. "We accept your aid, human," the officer said, each word sounding like it was being dragged out of him. "I am war leader Thekmal of the Third Talon. These are my warriors, Genter and Malbec." "Marcus Chen," Marcus replied, keeping his own weapon ready but pointed at the floor. "Pepper here doesn't talk much, but she's good company." The little dragon chirped and settled back into her harness, though her eyes never left the aliens. Dragons might be humanity's partners, but they hadn't forgotten their predatory instincts. "The trapped one is Telmoth," Thekmal continued. "He is young, inexperienced." Marcus nodded and moved back to examine the beam pinning Telmoth. The young Kethvar was conscious but weakening fast. His armor's medical systems were offline, and blue-green blood was pooling beneath the debris. "I can cut him free, but I'll need to work fast," Marcus said, pulling out his plasma torch. "And I'll need you three to trust me enough not to shoot me in the back while I'm working." Thekmal translated quickly, and Marcus caught enough words to know the war leader was explaining the situation in terms that wouldn't completely destroy his warrior's honor. Something about accepting aid from a worthy enemy rather than surrendering to human charity. Marcus activated his torch and began cutting through the collapsed support beam. The plasma cutter made quick work of the metal, but he had to be careful not to cause further structural damage. The ship was already groaning ominously around them, and the artificial gravity was becoming increasingly unreliable. "Your vessel," Thekmal said as Marcus worked, "it is not military." "Salvage runner," Marcus confirmed without looking up. "Though I did my time in the war, Third Fleet mostly destroyer escorts and patrol duties." "Third Fleet fought at Zirian Prime," Genter said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was rougher than the war leader's, with the kind of rasp that came from breathing recycled air for months at a time. Marcus paused in his cutting. Zirian Prime had been a nightmare, a 3-day running battle that had cost both sides hundreds of ships and thousands of lives. The humans had held the system, but barely. "I was there," Marcus said quietly. "Engineering section of the destroyer Defiant Asterisk. We lost a lot of good people." "As did we," Thekmal replied. "Perhaps we killed each other's friends." "Probably," Marcus resumed cutting, sparks cascading from the torch. "Doesn't change what's happening now." The beam parted with a shriek of tortured metal, and Marcus quickly helped Telmoth out from under the debris. The young warrior was in bad shape, internal bleeding, possible concussion, and his left leg was twisted at an unnatural angle. "Can you move him?" Marcus asked, gesturing toward his ship's airlock. Thekmal and Malbec lifted their wounded comrade between them, supporting his weight with practiced ease. Kethvar were strong enough that carrying an injured teammate was barely an inconvenience, even in failing gravity. The journey back to Marcus's ship took longer than he'd liked. They had to navigate around collapsed sections and avoid areas where the deck plating had buckled. Twice, they had to take alternate routes when corridors became impassable. Pepper proved her worth by scouting ahead, her small size and natural agility allowing her to check passages that might be unstable. She chittered warnings when they approached areas with dangerous structural damage and guided them towards safer routes. "Your dragon," Malbec observed as they made their way through a twisted maintenance corridor. "She is not what we expected." "Dragons are full of surprises," Marcus replied. "The big ones get all the attention in the war, but the little ones like Pepper are just as smart, maybe smarter." They reached Marcus's ship just as the Kethvar vessel's reactor began making truly alarming sounds. The rusty Venture wasn't luxurious, but she was solid and her life support systems were functioning perfectly. Marcus activated the medical bay and helped transfer Telmoth to the diagnostic bed. His ship's automated systems began scanning the injured Kethvar, adapting their protocols for alien physiology based on data from the war. "This will stabilize him," Marcus said, activating the medical field generators. "But he needs proper surgery. There's internal bleeding that my equipment can't handle." Thekmal nodded grimly. The nearest Kethvar facility was weeks away, and they didn't have that kind of time. "There is a human medical station in the Centauri system," Genter said reluctantly. 3 days at best speed." "They'll treat Kethvar patients?" Marcus asked, surprised. "The Covenant of Medical Neutrality," Thekmal explained. "Signed after the massacre at Rigel 7. Both sides agreed that medical facilities would treat any injured regardless of species or allegiance." Marcus had heard of the Covenant but never seen it in action. The massacre at Rigel 7 had been bad enough to shock both sides into agreeing that some things were beyond the bounds of civilized warfare. "Then that's where we go," Marcus said, beginning the undocking sequence. "Pepper, plot a course for Centauri Station, best speed." The little dragon chirped acknowledgement and flew to the navigation console, her tiny claws dancing across the holographic display with surprising dexterity. She'd learned to help with ship operations over the years, and her reflexes were actually faster than human normal. As they pulled away from the dying Kethvar warship, Marcus watched it on his rear display. The massive vessel was breaking apart now, its hull splitting along stress fractures as the reactor finally failed. Within minutes, it was nothing but expanding debris and cooling plasma. "Your ship saved our lives," Thekmal said quietly, watching the same display. "Your ship died with honor," Marcus replied. "What happened to her?" "Pirates," Malbec spat. "Human pirates, ironically. They caught us returning from a supply run, thought we would be easy prey." "They thought wrong," Genter added with grim satisfaction. "We destroyed 2 of their vessels before they crippled our engines," Thekmal explained. "But the damage was too extensive to repair in space. We managed to reach this system before life support began failing." Marcus nodded. Piracy had become a serious problem in the outer systems, with ships from both sides turning to raiding when the war made legitimate trade too dangerous. Most pirates targeted civilian vessels, but the desperate ones sometimes went after military ships. "Human pirates attacking Kethvar military," Marcus mused. "That's either very brave or very stupid." "Very dead now," Malbec said with satisfaction. The flight to Centauri Station would take 3 days, assuming Marcus pushed his engines harder than was probably safe. 3 days trapped in a small ship with enemy warriors who had every reason to hate him. 3 days to prove that maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward that didn't involve endless war. Pepper settled into her favorite spot on the pilot's chair and began grooming her scales. She seemed unconcerned about their passengers, though Marcus noticed she kept one golden eye on the Kethvar at all times. "Smart little dragon, trust but verify." The first day passed in tense silence. The Kethvar warriors had claimed the cargo hold as their territory, setting up a makeshift camp with the emergency supplies Marcus provided. They took turns watching over Telmoth, who remained unconscious in the medical bay under the care of automated systems that were doing their best to keep him stable. Marcus tried to give them space while maintaining his ship. The rusty venture required constant attention. Her recycled life support systems needed regular filter changes, her jury-rigged power distribution network had a tendency to overload, and her navigation computer occasionally forgot which way was up. It was honest work that kept his hands busy while his mind processed the situation. Pepper proved to be an unexpected diplomat. The little dragon seemed fascinated by the Kethvar, and they were equally intrigued by her. Dragons were legendary among their people, not as enemies, but as creatures worthy of respect. The fact that humans had somehow convinced them to fight alongside them was a source of both fear and admiration. On the second day, Thekmal approached Marcus while he was working on a stubborn hydraulic coupling in the engine room. "Your dragon," the war leader said without preamble. "How did your people convince them to join your cause?" Marcus looked up from his work, wrench still in hand. Pepper was perched on a nearby coolant pipe, apparently listening to the conversation with interest. "We didn't convince them of anything," Marcus said. "Partnership was their idea." Thekmal's translator struggled with the concept. Partnership implies equality. Dragons are clearly superior beings. "Are they?" Marcus asked, returning to his work. "Pepper's smart, fast, and tough, but she can't build starships or perform surgery or write poetry. We complement each other." "Your species has a saying," Thekmal said slowly. "The whole is greater than the sum of its parts." "Something like that." Marcus managed to free the stuck coupling, and hydraulic fluid began flowing properly again. "Dragons chose to work with us because we offered something they valued: exploration, purpose, adventure. They're not pets or weapons. They're partners." Pepper chirped agreement and performed a small loop in the air, showing off her flying skills in the confined space. "This is difficult to understand," Thekmal admitted. "Kethvar are raised to be independent, strong. We do not need partners." "Maybe that's why you've been losing the war," Marcus said, then immediately regretted his bluntness. But Thekmal didn't take offense. Instead, he was quiet for a long moment, considering the words. "You believe this? That partnership makes you stronger." "I think stubbornness makes you brittle," Marcus replied carefully. "Humans aren't the strongest or fastest or smartest species in the galaxy, but we're good at making friends, good at finding common ground. Even with enemies." Marcus gestured around the ship. "You're here, aren't you?" That evening, Genter joined Marcus in the galley while he prepared dinner. The Kethvar could eat human food with some modifications. Less salt, more protein, different mineral requirements, and Marcus had been doing his best to accommodate their dietary needs. "Malbec wishes to know about your military service," Genter said, accepting a bowl of modified stew. "Not much to say," Marcus replied. "I fixed things: engines, weapons, life support, kept the ship running so others could fight." "Support personnel?" Genter tasted the stew cautiously, then seemed surprised by the flavor. "Among Kethvar, only warriors receive honor." "That's a waste," Marcus said. "War isn't just about who shoots fastest. It's about logistics, communications, medical support, engineering. Take away the support staff, and your warriors are just well-armed people floating in space." Pepper landed on the table and began picking at her own meal, a mixture of protein cubes and nutrient paste that she seemed to find acceptable. "This partnership with your dragon," Genter continued, "it is not slavery." "Does she look enslaved to you?" Marcus asked. As if understanding the question, Pepper spread her wings and flew a quick circuit of the galley, avoiding obstacles with casual grace before landing back on the table. She fixed Genter with a golden stare and chirped once, as if to say, "Your move." "She chooses to be here," Marcus explained. "I found her as an egg, helped her hatch, raised her, but if she wanted to leave tomorrow, I wouldn't stop her." "And she chooses to stay." Marcus scratched behind Pepper's ear ridges, and the little dragon purred like a contented cat. "We're family, not owner and pet, not master and servant. Family." Genter was quiet for a long time, working through the implications. Finally, she asked, "What would happen if Kethvar and humans stopped fighting?" "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "Maybe we'd find other things to fight about. Maybe we'd find better things to do with our time." "Trade." Sure, exploration, art, science. There's a whole galaxy out there and we've barely scratched the surface. That night, Marcus was awakened by alarms from the medical bay. Telmoth was crashing, internal bleeding had worsened, and the automated systems weren't sufficient to stabilize him. Marcus found Thekmal already there, standing over his subordinate with an expression that might have been grief on a human face. "The machine says he is dying," Thekmal said quietly. Marcus checked the readouts. The young warrior's vital signs were erratic and declining. The ship's medical systems had done what they could, but Telmoth needed surgery that was beyond their capabilities. "There might be something," Marcus said slowly. "It's risky and I'll need help." "What do you need?" "Your people's natural healing factor is faster than humans," Marcus explained. "If I can stop the bleeding manually, his body might be able to repair the damage on its own. But I'll need to open him up, find the source of the bleeding, and seal it. Field surgery in a ship's medical bay with an alien physiology I barely understand." Thekmal didn't hesitate. "What do you need me to do?" "Keep him stable while I work. Monitor his vital signs, alert me to any changes, and pray to whatever gods Kethvar believe in because I'm making this up as I go." The surgery took 4 hours. Marcus had some field medical training from his military service, and the ship's computer provided guidance on Kethvar anatomy, but most of it was intuition and desperate improvisation. Thekmal proved to be an excellent assistant, his warrior's steady nerves unshaken by the blood and complexity of the procedure. Pepper helped in her own way, perching on Marcus's shoulder and occasionally chirping warnings when his hands shook from fatigue. Dragons had excellent spatial awareness, and her guidance helped him navigate the delicate work around Telmoth's vital organs. When it was over, Telmoth's vital signs had stabilized. The internal bleeding had stopped, and his natural healing processes were already beginning to repair the damage. "He will live?" Thekmal asked, exhaustion evident in his voice. "He'll live," Marcus confirmed, stripping off his surgical gloves. "He'll need time to heal, but the worst is over." Thekmal was quiet for a long moment, staring at his unconscious subordinate. "You could have let him die," the war leader said finally. "It would have been easier." "Easier maybe, but not right. You risked much for an enemy warrior." Marcus looked at Telmoth's peaceful face, young even by Kethvar standards. "He's not my enemy. He's just a kid who got caught up in something bigger than himself." Thekmal nodded slowly. "Perhaps you are right. Perhaps there is wisdom in partnership." When they finally reached Centauri Station, Telmoth was awake and complaining, a good sign for any species. The medical personnel took one look at Marcus's field surgery and declared it brilliant improvisation that had saved the young warrior's life. As the Kethvar prepared to transfer to their own people's diplomatic vessel, Thekmal approached Marcus one final time. "I will remember this," he said formally, "and I will speak of what I have learned to my superiors." "Just remember that we're all people," Marcus replied. "Different but people." Thekmal nodded and clasped Marcus's shoulder, a gesture of respect among his kind. Then he looked at Pepper, who was perched in her usual spot. "Small dragon," he said carefully, "you chose your partner well." Pepper chirped once and spread her wings briefly, dragon body language for approval. As Marcus watched the Kethvar shuttle depart, he wondered if anything would really change. One encounter, one act of mercy, one small step toward understanding. Maybe it was enough to start something larger, maybe not. But it was a beginning. 3 months later, Marcus was working on a legitimate salvage contract in the Kepler system when his comm array picked up a priority message on diplomatic frequencies. The sender's ID made him nearly drop his plasma welder. "War Leader Thekmal." "Marcus Chen," the message began in heavily accented standard. "I require your assistance, not as enemy to enemy, but as friend to friend." Pepper looked up from where she was helping sort salvageable components, her golden eyes curious. She remembered the Kethvar warriors, and her head tilted in the way that meant she was listening intently. The message continued. "I have been granted temporary authority to pursue peace negotiations with human representatives. However, there are those among my people who oppose this course of action. I require neutral ground for preliminary discussions, away from military oversight. Your vessel represents unique credentials for such meetings." Marcus played the message twice before responding. Peace negotiations were far above his pay grade, but Thekmal was asking for his help specifically. There had to be more to the story. "We're listening," Marcus transmitted back. "What exactly do you need?" The response came 12 hours later, along with coordinates for a meeting in the Procyon system, neutral space that neither side officially claimed. "I have convinced my superiors to allow preliminary contact with human diplomatic personnel," Thekmal's second message explained. "However, there are elements within the military hierarchy who believe any negotiation is weakness. They will attempt to sabotage these efforts if they learn of them too soon." Marcus understood. Military hardliners on both sides had kept the war going for years, profiting from the conflict while the galaxy burned around them. Any peace effort would threaten their power and influence. "What do you need me to do?" Marcus asked. "Transport myself and 2 advisors to meet with human representatives. Your ship is small enough to avoid detection, and your actions at Centauri Station have earned you respect among certain circles. You are seen as trustworthy. And if we get caught, then we will likely all die as traitors to our respective causes," Thekmal replied with typical Kethvar directness. Marcus looked at Pepper, who was now sitting upright with full attention. Dragons were excellent judges of character, and she had approved of Thekmal during their previous encounter. "What do you think, girl? Want to help save the galaxy?" Pepper chirped once and spread her wings, definite approval. "Tell me when and where," Marcus transmitted. The meeting point was an abandoned mining station orbiting a dead planet in the Procyon system. The facility had been stripped bare decades ago, but its basic structure remained intact, and it still had minimal life support. Marcus arrived first, using his ship's stealth systems to approach undetected. The station was exactly as advertised, empty, forgotten, and perfect for clandestine meetings. He docked at one of the functional airlocks and began setting up portable life support systems in what had once been the station's conference room. Pepper explored the station with enthusiasm, her small size allowing her to access maintenance tunnels and service corridors that revealed the facility's complete layout. She found no signs of habitation or surveillance. They were truly alone. The Kethvar arrived 6 hours later in a small courier vessel that had clearly seen better days. Thekmal emerged first, followed by 2 other Kethvar that Marcus didn't recognize. One wore the scarred armor of a veteran warrior, while the other was dressed in the simpler garments of a civilian, probably a diplomat or advisor. "Marcus Chen," Thekmal said formally. "I present Battle Leader Kexthara of the 4th Talon and Advisor Velnarin of the Diplomatic Corps." Kexthara looked like she had been carved from living stone. Her armor bore the scars of dozens of battles, and her eyes held the cold calculation of a professional killer. She studied Marcus with the attention of someone evaluating a potential threat. Velnarin, by contrast, seemed almost fragile compared to the warriors. Kethvar civilians were still large and imposing by human standards, but they lacked the predatory grace of their military caste. Their eyes, however, were sharp with intelligence. "Where are the human representatives?" Kexthara asked without preamble. "Still inbound," Marcus replied, checking his chronometer. "They should arrive within the hour." The human delegation consisted of a single ship, a sleek diplomatic courier that Marcus recognized as belonging to the Terran Diplomatic Service. It docked smoothly at the station's opposite end, maintaining physical separation between the 2 sides until they were ready to meet. 3 humans emerged from the courier. Ambassador Sarah Chen, no relation to Marcus, despite the shared surname, Admiral Janet Torres of the Terran Fleet, and Dr. Elizabeth Hayes from the Xenological Institute. Marcus knew Torres by reputation. She was one of the few high-ranking officers who had advocated for defensive rather than offensive strategies throughout the war. "Interesting choice of venue," Ambassador Chen said, looking around the abandoned conference room that Marcus had made habitable. "Neutral ground in the most literal sense." "Privacy was the primary concern," Velnarin replied in careful standard. "There are those on both sides who would see these discussions ended before they begin." "Let's skip the pleasantries," Admiral Torres said. "We all know why we're here. The war is bleeding both our peoples dry, and there are problems bigger than our mutual hatred." She was referring to the Void Stalkers, mysterious entities that had begun attacking ships along the galactic rim. Neither human nor Kethvar, They consumed everything in their path and left no survivors. Both sides had lost entire fleets to them, but mutual hostility had prevented any coordinated response. "The Stalkers have consumed 12 of our worlds in the past year," Kixthara said bluntly. "Our scattered fleets cannot mount an effective defense while also maintaining war against humanity." "Same problem on our side," Tors admitted. "We've lost 37 colonies and counting. Every ship we send against you is a ship that can't protect our civilians." Marcus listened to the discussion while Pepper perched on his shoulder, her golden eyes tracking back and forth between the speakers. This was history in the making, the first serious peace talks between the two species in over a decade. "The question," Dr. Hayes said, "is whether we can overcome 10 years of mutual slaughter long enough to face a common threat." "My people value strength above all," Velnaren explained. "Any agreement must be seen as gaining honor, not surrendering it." "Humans are pragmatic," Ambassador Chen replied. "We'll work with anyone if it serves our survival, but trust will take time to build." The negotiations continued for hours, covering everything from territorial boundaries to technology sharing to joint military operations against the Void Stalkers. Marcus found himself serving as an unofficial moderator, his experience with both sides giving him unique insights into their concerns. At one point, Kixthara questioned the humans' commitment to any agreement. "Your people are treacherous by nature," she said bluntly. "How do we know you will not betray us at the first opportunity?" Admiral Tors bristled, but Marcus stepped in before she could respond. "Because," he said, "betrayal would be stupid. The Void Stalkers don't care about our politics or our history. They'll consume human and Kethvar worlds equally. We either stand together or fall separately." Pepper chose that moment to spread her wings and fly a slow circuit of the room, landing on the table between the two delegations. Dragons had always been symbols of partnership between species, living proof that cooperation was possible. "Your dragon makes a point," Velnaren observed. "If humans and dragons can find common ground, perhaps there is hope for our peoples as well." The breakthrough came when Dr. Hayes suggested a limited pilot program, joint patrols along the Galactic Rim where Void Stalker incursions were most common. Human technological advantages would complement Kethvar warrior prowess, creating combined fleets stronger than either could field alone. "Start small," she proposed. "One sector, one joint fleet. If it works, we expand. If it fails, we've lost little." Thekmal looked at his companions, then at the humans. This would require significant trust from both sides. "Trust has to start somewhere," Marcus said. "Might as well be here." The formal agreement was surprisingly brief, just a few pages outlining the basic framework for cooperation. But it represented something unprecedented. Two species that had been trying to exterminate each other for a decade agreeing to work together. "This is just the beginning," Ambassador Chen warned as they prepared to leave. "There will be opposition on both sides. Hardliners who profit from the war will try to sabotage any peace effort." "Let them try," Kixthara said with grim satisfaction. "Some battles are worth fighting." As the delegations departed in their respective ships, Marcus found himself alone on the abandoned station with Pepper. The little dragon seemed pleased with herself, as if she understood the significance of what had just occurred. "Think it'll work?" Marcus asked her. Pepper chirped once and performed a small aerial loop, her version of optimism. "Hope you're right," Marcus said, beginning the process of shutting down the temporary life support systems. "Because if this fails, we might not get another chance." As the Rusty Venture departed the empty station, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he had just witnessed something historic. Whether it was the beginning of peace or merely a brief respite before renewed conflict remained to be seen. But for the first time in years, there was hope. And sometimes, hope was enough to change everything. 6 months after the secret negotiations, Marcus found himself in the strangest situation of his life, commanding a mixed human Kethvar patrol fleet in the Outer Rim territories where the Void Stalkers prowled. The joint command hadn't been his idea. Admiral Tors had insisted that someone with experience working with both species should oversee the pilot program. Since Marcus was one of the few humans alive who had actually saved Kethvar lives and lived to tell about it, he'd been volunteered for the position. "Still can't believe they made you a commander," Pepper chirped from her perch on the command chair of their new ship. the Unity Asterisk, a custom-built vessel that incorporated technology from both species. She was larger than the old Asterisk Rusty Venture, but maintained the same utilitarian aesthetic that Marcus preferred. The bridge was a masterpiece of compromise engineering. Human holographic displays were integrated with Kethvar tactical systems, creating a command interface that was functional for both species. The crew complement was equally mixed, 20 humans and 15 Kethvar, working side by side for the first time in history. "Contact on long-range sensors," reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the sensor station. The young human officer had volunteered for the joint program despite, or perhaps because of losing her brother in the war. Multiple signatures approaching the Kepler mining colonies. Marcus studied the tactical display. 5 contacts moving in a loose formation, exhibiting the erratic energy signatures that marked them as void stalkers. The entities were unlike anything else in the galaxy, ships that seemed to be partially phased out of normal spacetime, making them incredibly difficult to target and nearly impossible to predict. "Battle Leader Genter," Marcus called to the Kethvar warrior who served as his tactical officer. She had requested assignment to the Joint Fleet specifically to work with Marcus again, claiming debt of honor from their first encounter. "Analysis." Genter's claws danced across her console with practiced efficiency. Kethvar technology excelled at pattern recognition and threat assessment, making them invaluable in combat situations. "Standard stalker hunting formation," she reported. "They're moving to bracket the mining station's escape routes, classic predator tactics." "Time to intercept?" Marcus asked. 14 minutes at maximum acceleration," came the reply from the engineering station, manned by Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, a human who had somehow managed to make Kethvar and human drive systems work together without exploding. Marcus activated the fleet communication system. "All ships, this is Unity Asterisk. We have confirmed stalker contact approaching Kepler Station. Form up for intercept, Battle Plan Delta." The joint fleet consisted of 5 ships, the Unity as command vessel, 2 human destroyers, Defiant and Resolute Asterisk, and 2 Kethvar cruisers, Asterisk Bone Render II and Blood Oath. The mixed fleet represented the best of both technologies, human shields and long-range weapons combined with Kethvar armor and close combat systems. "Unity Asterisk, this is Captain Morrison of the Asterisk Defiant Asterisk," came the transmission. "Sensors show the stalkers are already engaging the station's defense platforms." Marcus could see it on the tactical display, pinpricks of light winking out as the mining station's automated defenses were systematically destroyed. The colonists had maybe 10 minutes before the stalkers reached the habitat modules. "All ships emergency acceleration," Marcus ordered. "We go in hot and fast. Genter, transmit targeting data to all vessels. Rodriguez, give me everything the engines can handle." The fleet accelerated toward the battle at dangerous speeds, pushing their drives beyond safe parameters. Human engineering and Kethvar metallurgy had created ships that could take punishment no single species vessel could survive, but they were about to test those limits. "Stalker vessels are moving to intercept us," reported sensor technician Kalvar, one of the Kethvar crew members. "They've detected our approach." "Good," Marcus said grimly. "Better they fight us than massacre civilians." The Void Stalkers were nightmares made manifest, ships that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, existing partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that human and Kethvar science barely understood. Their weapons ignored shields and armor, striking directly at the molecular bonds that held matter together. But they had weaknesses. They were vulnerable during transition between dimensions, and concentrated fire could sometimes force them into full materialization. The trick was coordinating attacks precisely enough to exploit those brief windows. "Blood Oath reports weapons lock on target 3, Genter announced. The Kethvar cruiser was armed with plasma lances that could punch through almost any armor if they could hit a fully materialized target. "Resolute Asterisk has firing solution on target 1, came another report. Marcus watched the tactical display as his fleet closed with the stalkers. The enemy formation was spreading out, trying to use their dimensional phasing to attack from multiple angles simultaneously. "Now," Marcus commanded, "all ships concentrated fire on target 1. 5 ships opened fire simultaneously. Human particle beams and missile salvos combined with Kethvar plasma lances and gravity torpedoes, creating a focused storm of destruction that caught the lead stalker during a transition phase. The entity writhed and flickered, its partially phased form becoming solid as the weapons overloaded its dimensional matrix. For 3 seconds, it was vulnerable, and 3 seconds was enough. The stalker exploded in a cascade of exotic energy that rippled through local space-time. Its destruction seemed to confuse the other 4 entities, buying the joint fleet precious moments to reposition. Target 2 is moving to flank, Culver reported, attempting to phase behind our formation. Bone Render Roman 2 * intercept, Marcus ordered. The Kethvar cruiser was perfectly positioned to cut off the flanking maneuver. War Leader Thekmal's voice crackled over the comm. Unity * we are engaging, for honor and survival. The Bone Render II charged straight at the flanking stalker, her heavy armor designed to withstand the kind of exotic damage the entities dealt. Kethvar ships were built like fortresses, slow but incredibly tough. The stalker's weapons lashed out, reality-distorting energy that would have crippled most vessels. But Kethvar armor had been designed specifically to resist such attacks, incorporating materials that remained stable even when local physics became unreliable. Defiant and Resolute converge on targets 3 and 4, Marcus commanded. Pepper, plot an intercept course for target 5. The little dragon had been monitoring the battle from her position on the command chair, her enhanced spatial awareness helping track the partially phased entities. She chirped acknowledgement and updated the navigation display with precise intercept coordinates. Human ships excelled at long-range precision strikes, while Kethvar vessels were nearly unstoppable in close combat. The joint tactics they had developed played to both species' strengths while covering their weaknesses. The battle lasted 18 minutes. When it was over, all 5 Void Stalkers had been destroyed, and the mining station was safe. The joint fleet had taken damage but no casualties, a remarkable achievement against entities that had previously destroyed entire fleets. All ships status report, Marcus requested as the fleet regrouped. Defiant reports minor hull damage and shield generator overload, Captain Morrison transmitted. Nothing we can't repair. Bone Render II has armor scoring but all systems functional, Thekmal added. We are combat ready. Similar reports came in from the other vessels. They had been bloodied but not broken. Mining Station Kepler, this is Commander Chen of the Joint Patrol Fleet. Please report your status. Commander, this is Station Chief Williams. We're battered but intact. Those things got through our outer defenses, but you arrived before they could reach the habitat modules. You saved 3,000 lives today. Marcus felt a familiar weight settle on his shoulders. Saving lives was what made the risks worthwhile, but each victory just reminded him how many more people were depending on their success. Genter, he said quietly, transmit a full battle report to both fleet commands. Include tactical analysis and recommendations for future engagements. Already compiling, the Kethvar warrior replied. This engagement demonstrates the effectiveness of combined operations. Our peoples fight better together than either could alone. Over the following weeks, word of the joint fleet's success spread throughout both human and Kethvar space. Military commands that had been skeptical of the peace initiative began requesting their own mixed units. Civilian populations, tired of endless war, began pressuring their governments to expand cooperation. Not everyone was pleased. Hardliners on both sides denounced the joint operations as weakness and betrayal. Some even attempted sabotage, attacking supply convoys and spreading propaganda about the inherent treachery of the other species. But for every act of sabotage, there were 10 stories of successful cooperation. Human medics treating Kethvar wounded. Kethvar engineers helping human vessels survive battle damage. Mixed crews learning to work together despite language barriers and cultural differences. Marcus found himself at the center of a movement he had never intended to start. Military officials sought his advice on integration protocols. Diplomats wanted his insights into cross-species cooperation. Reporters from both sides recorded his every word, looking for sound bites that could advance their respective agendas. Sometimes I miss being a simple salvage runner, he told Pepper one evening as they reviewed after-action reports in his cabin. The little dragon was perched on his desk, occasionally offering commentary on tactical decisions that only she seemed to understand. Pepper chirped sympathetically and nudged his hand with her snout. Dragons had an intuitive understanding of duty and responsibility, concepts that transcended species boundaries. A chime from his communication console interrupted his musings. The incoming message was marked with the highest priority codes from both human and Kethvar command structures. "Commander Chen," Admiral Tor's voice filled the cabin. "We have a situation that requires immediate response. Long-range sensors have detected a massive void stalker formation moving toward the Centauri system, the medical station where you first brought the Kethvar survivors." The tactical data that accompanied the message was sobering. More than 50 stalker entities in a coordinated fleet, moving with purpose rather than their usual random hunting patterns. It was the largest concentration of the creatures ever detected. "All available joint units are being redirected to Centauri," Tors continued. "This will be our first large-scale engagement, and success or failure could determine the future of human-Kethvar cooperation. We're counting on you, Marcus." Marcus closed his eyes and felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders. The little act of mercy that had started with rescuing Thekmal and his warriors had grown into something vast and unprecedented. Two species learning to trust each other in the face of existential threat. "Well, girl," he said to Pepper, "looks like we're going to save the galaxy after all." The little dragon spread her wings and chirped once, her sound of absolute confidence. Sometimes, Marcus reflected, the most important battles began with the smallest acts of courage, helping enemies, choosing cooperation over conflict, believing that partnership could triumph over hatred. The war was far from over, but for the first time in a decade, both species were fighting on the same side. And that, Marcus thought as he prepared orders for the fleet, might just be enough to change everything.